Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome all my friends to the song that ever ends. Come inside. Scott, how we doing this night? Nice, little cold evening here in Dallas. I don't know about what you got.
We're down in the 70s during the day. I'm guessing 60s now. So,
59 here. Officially got my winter gear out.
Yeah, I'm wearing the hoodie. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Us Houstonians, or I'm in Dallas now, but a native Houstonian, we don't handle cold well, folks. I don't know about you guys, but I was cold today. It was in the 60s, and I just legit couldn't get comfortable all day.
Yeah, when I was going to school up there, I used to sport the double sweatshirt.
2 sweatshirts.
Yeah, during the winter.
So now that the puffy vests are kind of thing, I guess they're popular in the 80s as well too, based on my knowledge of National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and Clark Griswold definitely rocks one of these while putting on Christmas lights. But I like to go with the hoodie and then the puffy vest on top of the hoodie. It adds a nice second layer, but I still have the freedom with the arms.
Yeah, that could work. I could see that.
If it's good enough for a Chicago winter, I think it can hold up to the windy elements here in the colony.
Yeah, no kidding.
All right, Scott. Well, kind of an interesting and what I think could be eventually a hilarious scenario breaking out in Major League Baseball right now. Right now, it's not funny, as we'll call them the Ramblin Rays, are currently looking for a new home based on the damage that was done to the roof and based on the fact that this was always built as an indoor stadium, so you can't just take the roof off and play as an outdoor stadium. They are homeless. Timeline doesn't look good to get this thing fixed for opening day. There's some negligence by the team here based on, the lifetime of this roof and when it should have been fixed. But all in all, this is not looking good.
Yeah, and I think both of you and I have attended games there. And having not gone to the Oakland Coliseum for an actual game, it is by far the worst Major League Stadium I've ever attended a game in. And I went to a game at Old Arlington Stadium. This is pre-ballpark of Arlington. So, I mean, it's pretty bad.
I think this would piss a lot of my neighbors off, but the old ballpark at Arlington sucks. It is so fucking hot in that place. Like, you just sit there and bake in the sun, and like, their solution was to install some sun sails. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what the hell does that do with no wind at 7 o'clock when when it's just baking on you? Like, day games there were awful. And I worked at a team 5 miles down the road, outdoor stadium, very well aware of what the in-stadium temperature was at our minor league park. Again, smaller version, less metal, probably worse at Arlington. That place was it hosted some World Series, but outdoor baseball in Texas sucks. But yeah, I will agree. I will say I think the Rays have done a better job in the last 4 years, at least from a TV standpoint, because the home runs, they have the flashing lights, and it's a better environment now than when I went when they were the Devil Rays. But But yeah, it was never a great major league stadium.
No, and the problem is that, and I think the Chicago people, for the South Siders, they built, that new Comiskey was the last of the old style ballparks before, you had Camden Yards, bringing in that new wave. And Tropicana Field is right around that same time frame. And so I don't even know if it was meant to be a baseball stadium, to be honest with you, but it was just in that, I'm going to say, not a magic time period, just what is the opposite of magic.
Yeah,
That just didn't fit anything.
it was that time period where like we thought domes were cool, right? Like we thought like Safeco, was it Safeco, the dome
Kingdom.
in the Kingdom, right? Astrodome, obviously Tampa's stadium, but like at the end of the day, domes suck, and the technology for the retractable roof is vastly superior, and it's not an eyesore, right? Like the Rays Stadium legitimately is an eyesore. You've got a catwalk that is in play, and the Astros have rafters and stuff like that with their roof that's in play as well. We're not perfect, but I feel like it's a lot easier to hit the catwalk, and I'm pretty sure if you hit one at a certain angle, it's like an automatic home run. So, I mean, that's like celebration station batting cage shit, right? Like we're like, hit this target for home run, hit this one for double, this one's an out. Like, I mean, come on.
Okay, so if we're going to let's assume that they are out until at least the All-Star break, right? And I think that's a pretty safe estimate.
So right now they said 6 months with no other complications at all, right? Like if they get there and they say that the only thing that happened is the roof blew off, it's like 6 months. But the thing, Scott, is that's if they're willing to spend the money because
Yeah,
they're supposed to move into a new stadium in 3 years. So would you pay to fix this one when you're going to have to demolish this space to build your new stadium? It's already
yeah,
half demolished.
that's where that's the question of what they want to do with it, going
And
forward.
and here's where I think the most hilarious thing has the potential to happen because I know it won't really happen. But what if now that the lease is open, they go to Oakland and all of a sudden, just as the biggest middle finger ever to the Fisher family, they're like top 5 in attendance because all the Oakland fans are like, fuck you, we're going to go to these games because it's not a Fisher owned team and we'll support the shit out of the Ramblin Rays.
Yeah, could you imagine though the travel being in the AL East
Yeah,
and
that would
being
suck.
Oakland? But the thing is that your alternate destinations, right? So we know Montreal has housed an MLB team before.
That's an old
So
stadium, though.
it's an old stadium. San Juan has housed the Expos for a bit. Um, I don't know of any other place that you can have a major league that they would be to themselves, right?
Correct. And then you have to look at the fact, Scott, too, of if you are going to share, right? If you're going to go, so realistically, you have the option of having your own facility in what Montreal, San Juan, or Oakland are kind of your three choices there. Or you can share with one of the minor league teams or spring training facilities in Tampa, which is outdoor. And Tampa has a lot of in and out rain showers, right? Delays throughout the day. How do you share a facility with another team when you're constantly having delays?
And do you sit there and say, okay, let's try Charlotte, Nashville, one of those kind of places?
Either way, I think they're gonna if they can't get this thing fixed by opening day, I don't think the minor league option is really there for them the same way it is, say, for the A's who are in Sacramento, because the weather there is just different. Like you are not going to have the same amount of rain out, play a doubleheader the next day kind of scenarios that you're going to have playing outdoors in Florida. It's just not the way it goes. So I don't know how they work that out. Like unless they find a spring training facility that no one's using and go at it that way, I don't know, Scott. I think it's a really awful scenario, but I looking at it like if they have to play the whole year somewhere else, to me, Oakland's really the only realistic option outside of maybe Montreal. I'd have to know what shape that stadium's in, though. What has been done to that stadium since the Expos left town?
Yeah, and the other part of it is you mentioned, in text, just to let some people see behind the scenes, like, hey, what happens if we, return the favor that they did for us, during Harvey and said like, hey, come to Houston. But see, the problem is that that kind of thing works for like a month or two. I don't see how you can make it work for a full season because you would have to jerry rig the schedule to where one is at home while the other one's away all the time.
Correct. I mean, like the Mets and Yankees shared a stadium at one point, but you would have to know that. I feel like going into the season, right? You can't. I feel like this is too late in the year to try and make changes like that. Obviously, there's extenuating circumstances, but when you do something like that, like you're not just changing the Astros and Rays schedule, you're changing most of the American League and probably some National League games too at that point. So that's not really an option for the whole season. But I agree. If the Rays need a month, right? If they need a month and then their stadium will be ready, as an Astros fan, knowing that there was a team 4 hours up the road who flipped us the double bird, and the Rays in Florida said, "We'll come here, we'll take care of you." How do you not open your door back up to them, right? And say, hey, you guys need a month. We'll share our facility for a month. You guys will probably have a decent crowd to play in front of it, cheap tickets realistically for fans. And you know what? We'll show some love because that's just the way Houston baseball fans are. And hey, it's a win-win for everybody. If it's more than a month, I think you got to look at finding as you said, a situation that's just for yourself. I don't know. I think finding a big enough minor league facility is probably the best option that you could either share with someone or maybe buy them out for the year. I don't know. What if you went to like a nice independent team and said like, hey, I don't know, hey, Cleburne Railroaders, I will give you $5 million to sit this season out and let me have your facilities for the year.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, the appeal of Houston would be we'll outdraw Tampa Bay's fans for the Rays.
Correct.
I mean, that's and part of it is you got to look at these things long term. And I think Oakland and Tampa Bay are such different situations. I think Oakland's a situation where they were supporting their team, but their facilities just went such in a crapper. And when
And the
you
owner was a shitbag
yeah
and wouldn't
yeah
like spend on the team.
yeah exactly. And so as soon as you were clear that you were giving Oakland the double birds, Oakland fans are not going to go back. But the thing is that Tampa Bay has had some really good teams, and they still don't support them. So I mean, that's just a situation where the ballpark was hard to get to. You probably don't remember that, but it was, as somebody who was driving there, who's not from the area, getting to that ballpark was not a fun experience. And so I don't know where they're building the new one. Hopefully, it's in
On
a
the same site. They're going to
uh,
tear down the old one and build it like next door. The old one's going to be like parking lot.
well, good luck.
Yeah, that's like it's not going to change anything. And like let's be realistic about the city of Tampa Bay, right? A large portion of it are people who are not born in Florida, right? We have people who move there for work. It's a pretty big shipping and receiving area. There's a lot of commerce for that, but also people who are retiring to Florida, aka the villages style lifestyle, right?
The
So,
snowbirds.
huh?
They call them snowbirds.
Right, snowbirds. Well, snowbirds technically come south for the winter and then go back to their home
Yeah.
for the summer because it's too hot in the summer. So they go back like my aunts and uncles do that from Florida and Connecticut. But then you've got also the people who just full on retire to Florida and move into places like the villages and drive around in their golf cart and do their thing, right? But the thing with those people are you grew up a fan of the Cardinals, the Yankees, the Cubs, the Mets, the Orioles, whoever it is, right? And in today's day and age, you can still watch your team in Florida, in Japan, in wherever you are through technology and apps, right? When my dad moved to Houston in 1983 or whatever it was, I'm sorry, in 86, you couldn't still watch the Yankees and Mets, right? Like he was at Houston. So as a baseball fan, my dad became an Astros fan. Now, here's the reverse. Tim in 2018 moves to a new city, can still watch his team, does still watch his team, and will never be a Rangers fan, right? That's because of technology. If you put me in Tampa Bay, guess what? I'm still fucking watching the Astros in Tampa Bay. I'm not going to Rays games unless the Astros are in town.
Yeah, that's true. And it's not a huge market. I mean, even if you include St. Petersburg, and you throw those two together, it's just not. And I mean, there's not much around there. Like Janet was talking about, hey, can they go to Orlando? And it's like, yeah, but a spring training facility seats what, 5,000-10,000? You can't put a big league game in those kind of facilities.
Most big league games.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you got a point there.
I think if you get like a good 15,000 seat spring training minor league facility, like it'd probably look like a pretty decent crowd actually, and whatever. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's a sad scenario. It sucks for the players more than anything, right? Like you get drafted where you get drafted, you get signed where you get signed. Like it's not like you're choosing to like I'm a lifelong Rays fan. I want to play for the Rays. Like I'm sure there are people like that. But at the end of the day, like you go where you go and you play for who you play for. And now your team doesn't have a stadium. Like it sucks. Like from a smaller perspective, right? Like I've worked in independent ball where we had a team drop out, they ran out of money, and so now we have an odd number of teams a week before the season. So what did we have to do? Like we literally put together a road only team, and this team never had a home game the entire year. It was basically the roster was pilfered over by every other team in the league. Anytime someone had an injury, they just made a bullshit trade and got somebody off the road team, and then they had to go find somebody else. And these guys had a shit year, man. Like they never had a home game. They lived on the road, hotel after hotel after hotel, and their record reflected it. But at the end of the day, that's what they signed up for, and they were willing to fight through it because that's what the league needed.
Yeah, exactly. And really, what's sad is that that's a team that knows what they're doing in terms of developing talent.
Yeah.
And they've got a good team. They got a good bunch of guys. If they could spend a little bit of money, they could probably compete in the AL East. But as it stands, they really can't.
Yeah. Well, speaking of competing, the Texans went to New England and they did a lot more than competing. They opened up a can of whoop ass. And Scott, I just want to give you a couple moments, take us through, you wrote it up for Battle Red Brog. Give us the breakdown of the game.
Well, so basically, I think, I changed it. I usually do a good, bad, and ugly. I couldn't in good conscience use a bad and an ugly in a game that you're up by 20 points. So basically, I'd have to start off with, the great. So the great, I think, obviously, is there were just a number of defenders that had some really good games. I mean, Will Anderson shows up, 3 sacks, also a deflected pass that Eric Murray somehow caught for an interception. So, that was a great game by him. We've been waiting for Will Anderson to show up and to completely dominate a football game. And I felt like, that was probably the first game of his NFL career, at least on the stat line, where you can sit there and say, that's the Will Anderson we drafted number 3 overall. And then, of course, you had some other guys. You had Mario Edwards, who unfortunately is now suspended for juicing. Maybe the juice was in him in this game because he had a career high 8 tackles. Also recovered a fumble. And so, he played big. You had Kalen Bullock with an interception and a fumble recovery in the game. You turned them over 4 times, which is something that this defense, with the exception of the Bears game, really hasn't done all season long, is turn the other team over. And so you applied pressure to Drake May. I thought he looked pretty good overall for a guy starting his first NFL game, but you forced him into enough errors to where you made it an easy day for your offense. Now, the good, I think, was fact of having Joe Mixon back. Joe Mixon had a very efficient day. I think 13 carries, over 100 yards, plus 3 big catches, including, a touchdown receiving and rushing. So, big fantasy day for, Joe Mixon owners. I think he put in 28 points. My poor opponent didn't start him because I think she just assumed he was injured. Too bad for you. You could have beaten me with Joe Mixon. But Dameon Pierce, one big, huge run. I think we'll get more to him whenever Tim gets back on. But at least he had a nice big run towards the end of that game, 54-yard touchdown run. And so this is a team that puts up 190 yards rushing. And the thing is with the Texans offense is I think contrary to what D'Amico Ryans or Bobby Slowick think, this team is never going to be a grind them out football team like the 49ers. That's just not going to be who they are. I think they're going to be more of a chuck it around the yard kind of football team because, quite frankly, CJ Stroud is better than Brock Purdy. And so that's, just one thing. And then, of course, our targets are about as good as the 49er targets, when they're all healthy. But with 190 yards rushing, that is enough. And you had enough big carries to where the defense had to respect the running game, which opens up things on the back end. It's not a day where, Stroud's numbers are going to jump off the page. He had 3 touchdowns. He had an interception that really wasn't his fault, but, overall good. So I was saying, Tim, the one I was saying the great was the defense. Will Anderson, I think that was his best game as a Texan by far. 3 sacks plus a deflected pass that turns into a pick. Mario Edwards, career high 8 tackles, and then of course he gets pinned for PEDs right after the game.
It wasn't PEDs. It's it's an illicit substance, is what it is actually.
Maybe he was. Maybe it
I
was
think it's
an upper.
Addy.
Maybe it was an upper because he was. And Kalen Bullock with an interception and a fumble recovery. So really some great performances on the defensive end. And then I said the rushing attack was the other good thing. I think Mixon, really nice day. Obviously you had the 54-yard run by Pierce, but I think we'll talk more about Pierce here shortly. But the key is for the Texans, I don't think they'll ever be the 49ers in terms of like just grinding teams out on the ground consistently. But if you can have enough of a running attack to keep the defense honest, I think that's about as good as you can hope for.
I agree, but I also think Joe Mixon's just a different kind of cat, man. Like it's back when, we had Arian Foster. You could have the same rushing attack and put Alfred Blue in there, or put Ben Tate in there, or put, Chris Polk, or, all the other names that weren't Arian Foster when Foster wasn't active, and it wasn't as good. But the moment you plug Arian back in, his combination of patience and vision and ability to make the first man miss and just turn it on was just something different that those other guys didn't have. And I think you and I can both agree Joe Mixon doesn't do it the same way Arian does. However, he has that little bit something extra that no one else on this roster has. He has the ability to hit a home run literally on almost any single play, but he also has the ability to gash you for 5 yards a carry and just slow cut till all of a sudden you can't stop the bleeding and he's breaking loose towards the end of the game. So I do think if we can keep Mixon healthy, the run game will continue to be better and continue to be more productive, because the 2 games that Mixon has played a full game, he's been healthy. He's rushed for 100 yards against what was supposed to be 2 good run defenses.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that he brings that Arian also brought is just the hands out of the backfield. There was that one play, I don't know if you saw this, it was a play where a couple of linemen got loose on Stroud, and he just kind of had to float it up in the flat. Mm-hmm. And the ball, he led him a little bit too much. He just reaches out, grabs it in full stride, and ends up gaining like 20, 25 yards on the play. That's just not, something that most backs are able to do well, and, that we've seen. And so when you add up both of those things, I was just pointing out, because I know this, because in our fantasy league, my opponent had Joe Mixon and didn't start him. 28 fantasy points that she could have had.
Receiving touchdown, rushing touchdown, 100 yards. I mean,
They're
my prediction
30.
was 125 yards. I don't think I said rush. I don't know if I said rushing, but he had 125 total yards when you
Yeah,
include the receiving, and he had 2 touchdowns. Your
right.
prediction was that Tank Dell, I can't remember, has a good day. I know you said he was going to have a touchdown. He definitely did that. He had a very productive day. I mean, I felt for the most part like Texans offense was kind of running at full strength this week. A bad pick that was not on Stroud. He hit Dalton Schultz right in the hands, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, it gets in the hands of Cougar legend Marcus Jones, and he returned it pretty well, which is what he was famous for in college. As one of the NCAA's greatest return men of all time. But yeah, he did what he always does. And I don't know if you saw this. He and Tank Dell did a little jersey exchange after the game, a little Coug on Coug love.
Well, and Schultz, had another drop, later on in the game, and so on the Battle Red blog chat, one of them threw out the old movie line, "Don't throw it to Stonehands."
I'll get into this a little bit more later, but
see if you can name that movie, Tim.
I don't know, Scott. Replacements?
That was Necessary Roughness.
Oh, I've only seen that one a few times. That's one with Sinbad in it, right?
Yeah, it is. It wasn't a great film, but that was. But yeah, you leave 10 points on the table, and there's going to be games against good opponents like this one we have on Sunday. You can't afford to leave 10 points on the field against the Packers and win. I mean, you're going to have to take advantage of all your opportunities.
Absolutely. Since you mentioned it, Scott, let's transition our way to the Packers game, as I've got the little title there ready to go. What are you predicting Sunday in Green Bay? 'Cause I think it's going to be nut check time here for your Houston Texans, right? You went into New England, a traditionally tough place for you to win, but this ain't Tom Brady really leading the Pats on the field anymore, right? That was kind of an ass beating, definitely an ass beating. This is a good Packers team with a good quarterback, with a fantastic group of wide receivers, one that would rival the Texans when the Texans are healthy, might even be better just based on the number of good wide receivers they have. They've got a great running back. The guy from the Raiders last year,
Josh Jacobs.
Josh Jacobs. They've got, again, Love, mobile quarterback, young, has shown in a couple seasons that he's capable of taking his team to hopefully the promised land if you're a Packers fan. This is a big game, and this is as I said, nut check time for your Houston Texans.
Yeah, and it's a point that I'm going to get to a little bit later on. How this game is not a primetime game, I'm not exactly certain.
I think you and I are going to get to similar points because I had to watch last week's game on Red Zone because in Dallas, Texas, with the Cowboys not on at the same time, CBS felt I'd rather watch the Bengals and whoever the fuck they were playing last week.
The
Bengals Giants. Bengals Giants was the fucking game I got last week.
Oh, that was on Sunday night.
Okay, I can't remember. I have to look up what my coverage map was because
it was it wasn't pretty. I'll get to that later. But I'm worried about this game. I can see this being another Texans loss. I think the Packers are 1.5 point favorites last time I looked. And I think the key is Jacobs because the Texans are pretty banged up on their linebacking core, and of course you have some injuries in that that secondary as well. Particularly in the safety room, and so I don't know. I mean, Petrie usually plays as like an extra linebacker, but they may have to bring him back and play him more as a traditional safety with the injuries that they have. So I don't know. I'm worried about the running game more than I'm worried about Love.
I definitely agree with you. 2020 banged up. Alshire banged up. You lost your defensive tackle who had the best game of his career. You get back an end that you're probably going to try and move inside. I don't know how well that's going to go in the first game, right? You're down a cornerback. You're down a safety. Defense is definitely banged up. But this is that D'Amico swarm mentality, right? This is number one always has to be stopping the run. And this is where I think it's time for Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter to step up. right? I think those two guys have to have a big game. I think Anderson had a great game last week. I think Hunter caused a lot of that too. You can't stop both of them. One of them's going to get free, and sometimes they're both going to wreak havoc. And if the Texans are going to find a way to stop the run or slow down this Packers offense, those guys got to get home at least one or two times each.
Right. And I think what you saw with Hunter, and this is what you want to see, is this team has one of the best pressure rates in the NFL. But in those first 5 games, they weren't getting to the quarterback a lot. They were pressuring him. They were forcing him to make bad throws. But Danielle Hunter has 1 sack. Now, what happened during that 1 sack, Tim?
Fumble or pick? I think it was a pick.
It was a fumble, and that was Mario Edwards when he recovered on the 10-yard line. You got to make plays like that. Whenever you get to Love, you have to make it count. And you have to get him down. You got to get them down, and you got to at least force 1 turnover, whether it's a bad throw or it's a fumble. I was going to say Kurt Hinish fell off his couch, Tim, when you forgot to mention him coming back. I know everybody's looking forward to great things from him.
You're right.
Of course, my tongue is firmly planted in my cheek there, folks.
No, but you're right. But the thing about sacks come in bunches, right? That's what Wade Phillips used to say. And when I think Will Anderson's games is a great example of that, right? If you're consistently putting pressure on the quarterback, you're going to have a game like Will Anderson did. Maybe not with the other curricular stuff he did, but you're going to have a 2 or 3 sack game if you're living in the backfield the way this Texans front has at this point in the season, right? It was bound to happen. It's Danielle's turn, realistically. Like, no one is launching himself at the quarterback the way this guy is. I mean, he is – the effort level from this man is like no one else on the field, realistically. He's relentless. And that kind of pressure is what's needed. But that kind of effort to stop the run is also needed. Like, we need some big-time TFLs from these guys. You've got to keep Jacobs in the box. You can't let him bust contain outside. And then at that point, you've got to win your man-on-man stuff up in the front 7 and make it to where you don't have to bring 8 in the box. If you can stop the run with 7 and sit back and have those guys in coverage, if there's a play action, if they run a pass out of a heavy set or something along those lines, you've got to be able to stop that too, because they've got a pretty good tight end in Kraft. So, I mean, the coverage is going to be tough. They've got 4 or 5 wide receivers. They've got a pass-catching running back, and they've got a tight end who can make big plays for them too. So between stopping the run and then lining up against that team, this one's one that, realistically could be a Super Bowl matchup at some point.
Yeah, and I think what you're looking at with the Packers offense is one that mirrors the Texans offense really well when Mixon's healthy. It's, basically, what do you choose to stop? Now, I feel good about the run defense this last week. If you take away the Drake May rushing yards, because, those are kind of on broken plays, and you're not traditional run plays. If you just look at running back rushing yards, Texans defense did pretty well against a team that likes to run the football in New England. So you're kind of hoping that you can get that kind of performance again, even though Amari Edwards is not going to be there.
Part of that, though, Scott, is probably the game score dictates it a little bit there. As the Texans were up big late, for a good portion of the second half there. So the Pats had to throw to get back into it. So that, that goes into it too. If the Texans can score in their opening 2 drives, if you get the ball first, go score, stop, score, and you're up 14-0, all of a sudden, stopping the run becomes a little bit easier because you're down 2 touchdowns.
Well, and I would point out, I hate to do scoreboard watching in week 7 of the NFL, but if the Texans should find a way to pull out this game, they're looking at a likely 3-game lead in the standings. And so my question is, I thought of this, a game show, NFL Network game show, where Mr. Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, says, announces to the team, I purchased 90 tickets to London. I purchased 89 to return. Who's staying?
I was about to ask, considering the Jags are in London 2 weeks in a row, is that the only reason Doug Peterson hasn't been fired yet? Like, if they came back from London after last week's game, do you think he already would have been fired? But considering they're already there, let's just let him finish out the London excursion and then fire him on the way home.
Maybe they sit there and say, hey, if you split, you stay. But as it stands now, I don't, looking at what I saw from New England and Drake May, they have a really good chance to win that game. I mean, I thought, Drake May did some good things.
Although Drake May had an MRI today, so we'll see there. But I mean, I picked up Demario Davis in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean,
Demario Douglas.
Yeah, so there's some of that going on. So, and then of course you got Tennessee, and have you seen the Will Levis mayonnaise commercial yet?
I have. It's pretty funny.
But I don't know how long that guy's going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL.
He's pretty terrible.
Yeah, so I don't know, and of course Mason Rudolph is no great shakes, but I feel like Mason Rudolph would do a better job with the receivers that they have than certainly Will Levis would do.
Yeah, I mean, Calvin Ridley made some comments in the locker room after their last game. He's like, yeah, I had 8 targets, but, how many of them came before the fourth quarter, right? Like, you got to get me involved earlier in the game so I have a chance to get into the game flow, right? Like, you can't ignore me all game and then come look my way in the fourth quarter and expect me to be in the flow of that game. And, like, yeah, you're a professional and you should always be ready, yada, 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 but you're also right, This is a guy who doesn't understand how to get his teammates involved. Like, this guy wants to play hero ball all the time, and that's just not how the NFL works.
No, and I have Tennessee's coach, obviously, Callahan's in his first year. So he's not going anywhere. But who is your number one on your dead man walking list in the NFL?
Oh, it's Peterson with a close second to McCarthy.
Yeah, McCarthy, I just don't see Jerry Jones pulling a trigger mid-year.
If they get waxed, I guarantee you, if they get waxed by the Houston Texans on Monday Night Football, that guy's done.
Well, if he lasts that long, I mean, based on what's been happening. I mean, when's their next home game? I mean, this is a team that's looking forward to going out on the road because that's 4 games in a row where they have just gotten absolutely lambasted at home.
Yeah. That's a bad football team at the end of the day. They've got a lot of money tied up in 2 guys, one of which is performing. CeeDee Lamb's a beast, but the other one is your quarterback. And at the end of the day, when your quarterback sucks, your team's going to suck. Like, it's really damn near impossible to win in the NFL with even average quarterback play, right? Like, a guy like Rex Grossman taking a team to the Super Bowl is pretty rare because the defense was so good. To have a guy who's a net negative, forget about it.
I don't know that he's a net negative as much. Mike Zimmer.
Dak?
Mike Zimmer, that defense is probably the worst defense I've seen. Now, particularly with Parsons out, they don't have anybody over on that side of the ball that's doing anything.
Yeah, I mean, you got linemen trying to score touchdowns on you. That's pretty bad.
When you're giving up 40-plus points, I mean, you could have Johnny Unitas back there quarterbacking for you. It's not going to matter.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And then at the end of the day, we'll get into this later, but I mean, the Cowboys did this themselves, right? Like, Jerry Jones goes in the offseason and says, we're all in, right? And then does absolutely nothing, delays paying these guys to right before the season. And then you guys are off to a terrible start. So, yeah, no wonder his seat's hot at the end of the day. But the Cowboys are never going to be good until Jerry Jones dies. Like, you're not going to get away from this disaster until that man is 6 feet under. Because at the end of the day, he still wants to be in charge of everything.
I feel bad for Dak because I don't think Dak is horrible. I just think he's not elite. And you're paying him like an elite quarterback. And the surest way to lose in the NFL is to pay an average quarterback like he's elite.
I don't disagree with you. And hindsight's obviously 2020, Scott, but would you rather let Dak play out his contract, maybe suck for a year, and go into the draft with a high pick looking to get your next guy at a much cheaper rate? Or do you think it's worth it to keep a guy like him at an inflated number like that?
Oh, no, this is not hindsight. I mean, I was thinking that at the time.
I mean, you see what Zach Darnold or what Darnold is doing, right? Sam Darnold. Yeah. You could go get a guy like that for a year, you could sign Sam Darnold for probably half of what you're paying
Oh no,
Um,
yeah. There's no way Darnold's going back to Minnesota. Because if you're Darnold, why would I take a long-term deal when I've got J.J. McCarthy sitting in the background ready to take over? So if you're Sam Darnold, you're going somewhere. Where are you going? I mean, are you going to Las Vegas?
maybe.
Are you going to? I mean, what situation would be better than Dallas, realistically, for somebody like Sam Darnold?
Yeah. It's baffling, but hey, Billy Belichick is sitting there just waiting in the wings. I think the power struggle between those two would be fantastic. I don't know if he would ever take that job after having dealt with Robert Kraft and all that stuff, and Kraft coming out and saying he gave Belichick too much power and all this other stuff. I don't know if Belichick would go into a Jerry Jones run house without having full control of everything, because him and Parcells got into it over the same thing, right? Like eventually Parcells was like, I can't cook if you don't let me shop for the ingredients.
Yeah, and the only thing is that realistically, CeeDee Lamb and Dak are there for the long haul. So, I mean, if you're a Bill Belichick, it's not like you're going to get to pick your quarterback. Your quarterback's picked for you. So the question is, can you win with him? Based on the amount of money that they had to pay him. And they probably paid him $10, $15 million more than they could have paid him just 12 months ago.
Yeah. That's hindsight 2020, right? You let him go have a big year, at least production wise. It wasn't necessarily anything in terms of championship stuff, but you let him put up numbers. And when you do that, price goes up. Same for CeeDee Lamb. So Jerry bit himself in the ass on this one. I think you look at what Caserio did, right? And you look at, let's look at the Nico Collins extension by comparison. You extended Nico a year early. You didn't have to pay him yet, but you did. And in doing so, you did it for a lot less than if you would have let him ball all season this year.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And even with the injury, even with him being out 4 or 5 games, he's still probably going to eclipse 1,000 yards.
Exactly. I mean, when healthy right now, Nico Collins legitimately looks like a top 3 receiver in the NFL. Part of that is CJ Stroud. Part of that's Nico's a dog, man. And I'll admit, 2 years ago on this podcast, I was wrong about Nico Collins.
I was too. You were not the only one. I mean, I thought Nico had a chance to be a pretty good number 2 wide receiver. I didn't think the ceiling was going to be number 1 wide receiver.
Hey, and I think looking back on it, now pairing him with a guy like Diggs, who himself was the 146th pick in the draft, who was turned into a number 1 wide receiver. Perfect kind of maybe 2 guys to have in a room together to have chips on their shoulder mentality to say, hey, let's go be dominant. No one wanted us. Now they got us.
Yeah, absolutely. And Diggs is on pace. I mean, a minor hat tip to him. He is on pace to have over 100 catches and well over 1,000 yards and about 10 touchdowns on the season.
Well, speaking of people nobody wanted, let's talk about some people that teams did want, because it looks like the NFL trade season is popping off. Amari Cooper gets out of football purgatory and into the warm embrace of Josh Allen, a much needed receiver for Josh Allen, and just a wonderful win for Amari Cooper to get out of Cleveland.
Well, and I think I texted this to you. This reminds me of when Amari Cooper was in then Oakland, and Oakland was an absolute dumpster fire. So Jerry Jones, when probably stupidly pays a first-round pick for Amari Cooper, and everybody's making fun of him. And what did he do in that season that he went to Dallas? He was like immediately, routinely catching over 100 yards receiving every game, and ended up going over 1,000 yards on a season, even though he was only there for half the season in Dallas. I could see him doing something pretty similar in Buffalo. I could see him putting up easily 600-700 yards for the remainder of the season, which is only 10, 11 games, and you get to 1,000 yards on the season, even though he's off to a horrible start because of his quarterback, realistically, and not him.
Yeah, when you look at his career numbers, I mean, he goes for 1,000 yards his first 2 seasons in Oakland at the time. Has a down 2017, some injuries involved there, I believe. 2018, you're right, goes for over 1,000 between the Raiders and the Cowboys, most 725 of which coming with the Cowboys. Then he goes over 1,100 the next 2 years with the Cowboys, 865 in 2021. I think he missed some time there, though. 1,100 in 2022, 1,200 in 2023. And then this year, again, as you mentioned, quarterback play sucks and he's off to a slow start. But Josh Allen's dying for a big-time receiver, right? And they got it for him. And then in the move I think that we all saw coming, Aaron Rodgers gets his man back in his former receiver and I guess best friend from Oakland to the Jets.
So my favorite is
Davante Adams is the receiver.
Yeah, my favorite is that everyone I listen to XM usually on the way to and from work, and they'll do like a sports update. And they said, well, Davante Adams is, healthy and practicing with the Jets, even after mysteriously missing the last 3 weeks. This is how they framed it, Tim. Then the news update, mysteriously missing the last 3 weeks with a hamstring injury.
Make it a business decision.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. And the thing is, and I'll get to this point later, does this change anything with the Jets?
Minimally, I think if maybe if they won that game against the Bills and they were 3-3 instead of 2-4, I'd feel a little bit better about it. But at the end of the day, the offense hasn't looked very good for them. They just haven't looked like a great football team. I think Brett Favre looked better in his time as a Jet than Aaron Rodgers has.
Well, and the thing is, so let's say you think that pretty comfortably you need to get to 10 wins to get to the playoffs?
Yeah, probably.
That's an 8-3 finish.
Yeah.
Does that look like an 8-3 football team?
It doesn't, but you never know, realistically, right? I mean, the weapons really Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams, Breece Hall, Aaron Rodgers.
They had Mike Williams, which they never really used.
He got thrown under the bus on national television. Lazard's had some nice moments for them. I mean, it seems like the guys that he has Packers connections with are going to do fine, and he has trouble linking up with people who he doesn't have a long history with.
I think you have two main problems on that team, and this doesn't change anything. Number one, your problem is Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers has basically handpicked that roster. Aaron Rodgers is just not a great quarterback anymore. He's just not. And so, when you look at it, I mean, to me, see, you put CJ Stroud in that offense, he's going to win more games than he loses with those targets. I just don't see it. And so the number two problem is that, again, with Aaron Rodgers, he's got his boy, offensive coordinator Hackett, calling plays. And apparently, if you go according to the timeline, you tell me what you think this means. Robert Saleh, in the morning that he got fired, had decided that Hackett was no longer going to call plays. Then he was called into the owner's office and told that he was fired. So you tell me, what do you think happened?
I mean, Hackett's not calling plays anymore regardless, but I don't know. I think it was I think Hackett was going to get fired more than anything. I truly think they're downplaying it as Hackett was going to not call plays, but I think it's more that Salah was going to fire Hackett, and that's what got him fired.
And so Aaron Rodgers did a solid for his boy, which if Aaron Rodgers is doing solids for people, I'm sorry, but that
I mean, Aaron Rodgers made that trade, right?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think it makes them better, sure. I mean, yeah, if you sent Adams to the Texans would be a better football team. But I would question Nick Casario's sanity if he's trading a third-round pick for another wide receiver when this team is loaded with wide receivers.
Right, and I will say, though, as you said, you got to go 8-3 down the stretch to put yourself in playoff contention. If I'm a GM or whatever it is, and I'm looking at it from that perspective of this season, I have to find a way to go 8-3. What can I do to make this team better or at least good enough to do that, going to get that receiver that my guy has chemistry with might be the answer to that question.
Maybe. I think I think you and I both agree the Amari Cooper deal is a lot more impactful, mainly because he's in a walk year. So let's say, what's the worst that could happen? This move doesn't work out for Buffalo. Maybe he and Josh Allen don't gel. End of the year, you just wash your hands, you walk away, and you start over. So I mean, with they what they ended up doing with Adams is they created two voidable years so that they could make the cap hit this year less. But he's got a balloon payment of like $32 million due next year.
I mean, at the end of the day, though, he's a better receiver than Cooper is, and so I don't think having Davante Adams on your team next year hurts you. But I will say I agree with you. I think Amari Cooper's a better receiver. I'd liken it because to me, Amari Cooper's he's a vet. He's a professional. He shows up to work and he does it day in and day out. On the baseball side, this is, to me, I'm an Astros fan. It's kind of like the Astros getting Michael Brantley, right? Like you just needed that professional in the middle of your lineup who doesn't strike out, who makes good contact. What did the Bills desperately need? A professional wide receiver, a guy who could show your young rookie how to get it done, who could teach him the ropes, who could help your veteran quarterback. Because at the end of the day, having your tight end as your number one wide receiver has made Josh Allen's season a lot harder than it needs to be. They needed that guy. They went and got that guy, and it didn't really cost them as much.
And realistically, after beating the Jets already, who else is challenging them in the AFC East right now?
Nobody. I mean, the Dolphins maybe going into the year before Tua, is turning his brain into mush, but after that, the Jets may be going on a miraculous run. Who knows? But at the end of the day, they're probably still going to have to beat the Bills one more time or have to beat the Bills in their next matchup if they go on that run. So both these teams did what they needed to do to get better. But looking at that game, the Bills should have blasted the Jets. As we've mentioned, the Jets are not a great team. The Bills are a perennial Super Bowl contender with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and you play down to your opponent. So if I'm a Jets fan or if I'm the Jets GM, I'm looking at it and going, hey, if we had a little bit better receiving core, maybe Aaron Rodgers could have gotten us down the field at the end of the game for that win. If I'm the Bills GM, I'm looking at we just barely beat the Jets and they suck. We need to find a way to be a better football team.
I think that's a coach at the end of the season, if he hasn't made it to the Super Bowl, is probably on his way out.
McDermott?
Yeah, he's a guy that's just chronically underachieved. I mean, the Bills have had one of the best rosters in the AFC. And yeah, you could sit there and say it's hard to get through Kansas City, and I'll grant you that. But they haven't lost to Kansas City every year. They've lost to some other teams along the way as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to me, I mean, if he is not, I'll say this, if he is not in the AFC Championship game, I think he's gone.
That's a bold prediction, Scott. We'll have to see if that one plays out. Speaking of bold, though, some people do some bold, dumb things. And it's our job to acknowledge those bold, dumb things when we give out our weekly Horse's Ass Award. Scott, do you want to get us started with our Horse's Ass this week?
Okay, so in the sports world, and I don't know, this is one of those things you never know. I don't know, is it the NFL? Is it the television executives? But why are the New York Football Giants on primetime television? Why? We know they suck. I mean, they were my pick to be the worst team in the NFL this year. And they're not the worst team in the NFL, but damn it, they're close. And the thing is that, I could sit there and look at it. And I can look at the Bengals because the Bengals weren't good coming into that game either. But the Bengals, I could sit there and go okay, you've got Joe Burrow. You've got some good wide receivers. Okay, I expect the Bengals to be a good football team. Okay, I get it. Crap happens, right? And sometimes seasons go sideways. But who in America thought the Giants were going to be a good football team? Name one person who thought they were going to be good outside of the Giants, football offices. I thought, yeah, this team, oh yeah, America wants to see this team. Now they put the Jets on because I think they think Aaron Rodgers drama. People want to see drama. I don't want to see drama, Tim. I want to see good football. And the Jets are not a good football team. I mean, I could maybe stretch my mind to sit there and see maybe the Jets as a playoff team coming into the season. Maybe. But I weren't picking them in front of Buffalo, and we're going to be picking them in front of Miami. So, I mean, that's you're backdooring your way into the wild card at that point. So, NFL executives, television executives, Green Bay and Houston. You got 5-1 and 4-2. You got two of the best young quarterbacks in football, and you're burying this game at noon. What the hell are we doing? What are we doing?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit onto your horse's ass here, Scott. I got some numbers for you because I pulled them up while you're talking. 2023, I feel like we had the Jets and Giants shoved down our throat. Take a guess on how many primetime games each one of those teams had.
I'm going to go 5 for the Jets and 4 for the Giants.
5 and 5. You were right on the Jets.
Oh.
We had the Giants shoved down our face on primetime 5 times last year. And they sucked on all of those appearances. So did the Jets. Now we roll into 2024. Everybody knew the Giants sucked. It's okay. We can rewrite the schedule this year. Giants still have 3 fucking primetime games. Do you want to take a guess on how many the Jets have this year?
I'm going to go 5 again.
6. They gave them another
6,
one.
right?
And then here's my biggest problem, Scott. Not only are the primetime games out of whack, the fucking coverage map is a disaster. I looked it up. We here in the DFW area of Texas, let me say it again, Dallas, Texas, did not have the Houston Texans on TV because we had Baltimore versus Washington. Was it a great game? Sure. I am a fucking Texan. I live in Texas. Why am I getting that? Every other part of Texas except Dallas got the Houston Texans on Sunday. The Cowboys were not on. They did not play until the afternoon slot on Fox. Explain to me why we can't have a game featuring a Texas team on in Texas. It's absolutely asinine.
Well, and I think what it is they want you pay that money to YouTube TV for the NFL Sunday Ticket, Tim. I think that's what they're trying to go after.
They get $100 a year out of me for Red Zone. You can get it through the NFL app, and that's all they're going to get. I can get enough of the game through Red Zone and following along on the Texans app. You're not going to get me to pay. Like, my wife's a Niners fan. I'm a Texans fan. The best way for both of us to be happy is just to put Red Zone on. And then no one can complain about whose team is getting watched more because that's up to Scott Hansen.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, my scumbag this week, Scott, speaking
of horse's ass.
I'm sorry, yeah, my horse's ass this week, Scott. After piggybacking on yours, I'm going to go Jerry Jones. For those of you who haven't seen it yet, Jerry Jones does a weekly radio show with, I think it's 104.3. It's called The Fan here in DFW. And they're, we could call it similar to 610, where they are the flagship station of the Dallas Cowboys. And you know what? I will tip my cap to The Fan because they asked some legitimate questions of Jerry Jones, saying, hey, you said we were all in this offseason. Then you did nothing in free agency. And now look where the team is. What do you have to say? And instead of sitting there and answering these questions, Jerry Jones has a literally Donald Trump level tirade, calls these people idiots, threatens to have them fired from the radio station, says, if you're so smart, come to the NFL meetings. Everybody's looking for geniuses in the NFL. Hey, man, at the end of the day, these guys are the mouthpiece of your fans, right? They are the loudest fans that you have. They have a little bit of journalistic integrity. They're going to ask the questions that the fans want to know. But at the end of the day, what they are saying is what your fans are saying. So when you respond like that, you're essentially flipping the bird to every one of the fans of your team and saying, I don't give a fuck. You're still going to come watch anyway.
Yeah. I mean, he's 82 years old?
Yeah.
Can you imagine any team hiring an 82-year-old general manager? I mean, what would you say about that team?
They're idiots. I mean, unless like, I don't know, is there a guy at 82 that like if the Texans brought him in, like let's say Bill Belichick's 82 years old, okay, and Nick Casario just like one day is like, you know what, my wife and kids want me home, I'm out, and like he just leaves, and it just so happens it's Bill Belichick's 82nd birthday, and he's willing to come in and be your GM, but he's 82. Would you want Bill Belichick at that point? Because Jerry
I
Jones
don't
isn't
want,
even like a football mind, right? He's an oil guy who has a lot of money who made himself the boss. But like, if you could get a real football mind at 82, do you even want that football mind?
I don't want him at 72. I mean, just based on what he built without Tom Brady. But, yeah, I don't. Poor Jerry. He's living in the same world. We're going to get into the politics here, a little bit later in the show, but he's basically living like a Trump life where, he's a special little boy and nobody ever says anything bad to him. And all of a sudden, somebody asks him one legitimate question and he just goes ape shit. I mean, it's the same basic thing.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong. Less of a douchebag that he's going like it's no lives are at stake, right? It's Dallas Cowboys
Yeah.
football, but his response is Trumpian in many ways, like a guy. But it's not just it's all these rich billionaires, right? They get old, they think they're excellent at everything because they were good at one specific thing, and they think they're God's gift to humanity. Like I guarantee you, Jerry Jones thinks he's the best thing that ever happened to the Dallas Cowboys. Like he will go to his grave thinking Dallas loves me. They are so thankful that I bought this team. They love me here, and I lived a perfect life.
Well, on balance, if you look at 30 plus years, sure. He won 3 Super Bowls. He's made them a ton of money. So, on balance, I could say Jerry Jones has been good for the Cowboys. But I think every good person knows. I mean, there's times when you just need to hang it up and you need to sit there and say, I'm going to let my son take this thing over because I can't do it anymore.
I think, I mean, if anything, the city of Frisco owes Jerry Jones the biggest thank you out of anyone. Like Jerry has helped put Frisco on the map at a level that no one else has. And Arlington too. Arlington was a small little baseball town, and all of a sudden the Cowboys come to town, and that changes
Yeah.
everything. So two small town little cities that Jerry has turned into hot spots of commercial attraction. Definitely owe him a thank you. But the Cowboys fans, since like 1997, probably
Yeah,
don't
no,
think
that's
very
true.
high of him.
No, that's true.
All right, Scott. Well, speaking of people we don't think very high of, let's talk about some people who had a great week. People we do think a lot of, and people that maybe we want to just tip that cap to. Who you got for us this week, Scott?
I'm going to tip my cap, and every bone in my body hates doing this, Tim, but I've got to do it anyway. Going in, the NLDS, the Dodgers are down 2-1, and what's the conversation? Conversation is, okay, Dave Roberts is going to get shit canned. The Dodgers underachieve, and then they rattle off 33 consecutive scoreless innings to take them through the end of game 3, game 4, game 5, and game 1 of the NLCS. So, when your team comes up big and breaks a postseason record like consecutive scoreless innings, as much as I hate the Dodgers, I got to give you a hat tip on that.
You're a better man than me because it was never even on my radar to give the Dodgers a hat tip, Scott. I will be honest. I've watched zero postseason baseball since the Astros were eliminated. Maybe like a collective 3 minutes just to check scores, but no desire. Absolutely no desire. My heart was ripped out and crushed to a million pieces. So baseball season is over for me as far as I'm concerned.
I wouldn't say I've watched.
You paid attention.
Paid attention, yeah.
I'm going to tip my cap this week, Scott, to Will Anderson. We talked about the performance, best of his career, 3 sacks, tackles for loss, gets in the backfield, tips a pass. He was absolutely outstanding. the numbers hadn't been there at this point in the season for him until this game, but we talked about the relentless effort. They are living in the backfield. They just weren't getting home. Well, the sacks came in bunches, and hey, he looked fantastic on Sunday. Tipping my cap to Will Anderson.
That's a good call. Good call.
All right, Scott, from hat tips to scumbags, it's that time. These people have offended us, and it's time that they are recognized as scumbags of the week.
So with your indulgence here, Tim, I want to go sandwich. I'll go first and last because I think I've got a double one this week.
I'm myself having a little trouble narrowing it down. You and I had a conversation. I'm going to move on from the petty scumbag, and we're going to get real with it. So you go ahead and go first.
Okay, so my first one, Stop Houston Murders PAC. So stophoustonmurders.com. You're not, since you're not here down in the Houston area, you have not been subjected to this treatment. They have run commercials, Tim. And when I say run commercials, I would say in the span of an hour, you see probably 30 of these commercials. And I'm not exaggerating because they run about 5 or 6 back to back to back to back to the point where they're interrupting legitimate ads. You're watching a legitimate ad and then like 10 or 15 seconds in, oh, no, we got to go back to this one. So what are Stop Houston Murders? What are they saying? So basically their whole thing is we have to vote out all of the Democratic judges in Harris County because they're bad judges. And so what they do is they parade out these people that had family members that were killed by people that were released by these quote unquote bad judges. And they actually said this in the ad, Tim, all of them are Democrats. Now, when I hear that, when I hear all of them are Democrats, I don't know about you, Tim, but my bullshit meter immediately starts screaming, bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. And then the second thing is we don't have any context as to why these people were released. Were they violent? They were told they were violent. Yeah, they killed somebody. They're violent now. Were they violent before? We don't know because they don't tell us who the person is so that we could like research their criminal record. Were they paroled by a parole board? Did they serve their full sentence? We don't know any of these things, Tim, because of course, they're just going to tell us they're bad judges, And I gave you the H.L. Mencken quote earlier that, there's, not a complex problem that can't be solved confidently, and passionately and wrong. And to me to sit there and just say, be tough on crime, throw them all in jail. So think about it this way. Let's say I'm a shoplifter. Should I go to jail for life, Tim?
No.
But,
no, you should not.
But you don't release me because I might kill somebody. I mean, that's basically what these people are saying. It's ridiculous.
I mean, to me, Scott, this reeks of the Willie Horton ad. This reeks of one of the most racist and vile political campaign ads ever used, and the one that won George Bush Sr. or Daddy Bush the election, right? Like, to me, this is literally straight out of the Bush playbook, and it sounds so much like the ad that they ran for Willie Horton. I don't know how you could differentiate it if you put them up side by side.
And really, I don't know whether to feel sickened by these people or sad for them that people are using their tragedy as as political pawns. I guess you have to
It's a combination, right? Like, it's sickening that they're using it, and it's sad that these people actually think that they're like helping. It's sad that they think that they're doing the right thing by getting their story out there, and it's being taken advantage of in the way that it is.
Yeah, because I feel bad that something bad happened to people, and I fully recognize that when you have a family member that's killed, you don't care about the murder rate because your family member was killed. But what we know, Tim, and the facts is that not only is murder down nationwide, it's down in Houston. It went down from 2022 to 2023 when these bad judges were in control. So are we saying that the murder rate went down in spite of them? Or are we just going to go out and out lie and say, like, this is Gotham City and just people are getting murdered left and right?
No, it's the latter, because to Republicans, anecdotal stories are always more important than like legitimate facts and statistical evidence. Because you can campaign off one welfare queen, but when someone comes to you and says this is the facts and these are many people are on welfare and there's the percentage of welfare fraud that happens every year, and all they're going to say is, well, one case is too many. Here's an example why this one person defrauded welfare for $100,000. Boom.
What is
And
his name? Brett Favre?
I think I mentioned him last week as my scumbag.
Yeah, you did. You did.
But at the end of the day, their anecdotal stories work with their audience, and so they use them. I mean, again, the Willie Horton ad is commonly discussed as one of the most racist pieces of political theater we've ever seen, but also it won the fucking campaign for GW. So why wouldn't they do it again? It worked.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so I've got one, and I'm pretty sure we're going to team up on two, but for different reasons. I went back and forth on this, Scott, and I'm going to lightly say, like, I was really considering Donald Trump for his performance at what was supposed to be a town hall and turned into a 39-minute karaoke / dance session. But like that's just too easy, right? So we're gonna cross Donald off the list, and we're gonna talk about Rafael Teddy Boy Cruz. We had the Texas Senate debate last night where he and Colin Allred squared up, and we all know how debates work, right? No one's ever going to answer the real questions. You're coached to get to your talking points. You're coached to, stay on track. Don't let the other person get you off message. And debating with Ted Cruz is a special skill. You cannot get into mudslinging with Ted Cruz, because when you're a giant piece of shit, you can throw shit all over the place, right? Like I think the South Park episode on Bono proved that the world's biggest pieces of shit can always make more shit. So at the end of the day, Allred is not going to sit there and mudsling, but he made some good points, and maybe he was a little weak on others. But Ted Cruz openly laughing that January 6th was a threat to democracy, that his style of politics is a threat to democracy. He's laughing when he's told that women are dying in Texas because they can't get the health care they need, the reproductive care they need. He's laughing. People's lives are at stake here. And to this man, it's a giant joke. And I don't understand Republican, Democrat, Independent. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is. Like, at what point do you just be like, this guy sucks? It doesn't matter that I am a Republican. It doesn't matter that I am a Democrat. This guy fucking sucks. I don't like him. I'm not going to vote for him. But yet, for some reason, people like my neighbor down the street with a Ted Cruz for Texas sign in the yard still continue to support this man as he laughs about women dying from being unable to get the reproductive care that they need. My wife almost died from an ectopic pregnancy, something that has risen in rate of death by 200% in Texas since the abortion laws were overturned. And he laughs at that. Fuck Ted Cruz, man.
So I'll give you a quote on Ted Cruz, and I want you to tell me who you think said it. Quote, Ted Cruz could be killed in the middle of the Senate floor, and if they held the trial in the Senate, nobody would vote to convict. Who said that, Tim?
It's going to be another Republican.
It is.
Who's the one who's like stroked out on TV, who's in charge of the judges? From Kentucky.
Oh, no, Mitch McConnell? No, not Mitch McConnell.
No. What about, I don't know, Josh Hawley maybe? No, he's a congressman.
No,
senator.
It's a good guess, but it would be Lindsey Graham.
Oh, that was that was my third guess. Okay.
Imagine a fellow Republican saying that about you.
Ain't no worse Graham.
Yes. Imagine if I were a Democrat in Congress and Democrats were joking about somebody killing me in the halls of Congress. I mean, how much of a big of a scumbag would I have to be?
Yeah, I mean, he's a giant piece of shit. He ran as a Tea Party member and has has moved further and further right ever since. Like, this guy is bought and paid for by big pharma. He's bought and paid for by oil and gas. He's trampled on work. He's worked to trample workers' rights and enrich we'll call them oligarchs of America, the billionaires. This guy is continually bought and paid for. Is Colin Allred perfect? No, but he's better than Ted Cruz. Shit, a wet fucking sock is better than Ted Cruz because it wouldn't actually do anything, and nothing is better than what he does.
Yeah, you're right on that.
Like, if you honestly were a senator who didn't show up for any of your votes for the entire 6 years that you were there, I'd say you had a more productive term than Ted Cruz.
Well, and I don't know if is he or Greg Abbott the most frequent winner of our award?
I don't know, man. JD Vance gave him a run for his money there since
he had 3 in a row. Yeah.
I think I hit Ted Cruz pretty hard early on this show.
Yeah, it's definitely when you include the snap hook.
Yeah, Large Marge hasn't made an appearance in a while. I think we've just tuned her out. We had a weekly Marjorie Taylor Greene's Twitter segment at one point.
We did, absolutely.
All right, Scott, thank God we don't have that level of insanity in our lives anymore.
So one more, and I think you're going to echo this on me here, but you're going to take another angle.
I am.
Because here's what I found out today. And I sent you this piece. Jeff Tiedrick writes for Substack. Everybody is entitled to my opinion is the moniker that he goes by. Tim and I were kind of remarking that maybe there's some grammar issues, some capitalization issues that we see in his writing.
That's not a maybe, Scott. That's a definite.
But I will, as a writer, I will say maybe it's a stylistic thing. Maybe that's what he's going for. I don't know. We'll see. But he brought on the thing. So when you go on social media and you hear conservatives talking about, oh, why isn't this liberal celebrity giving to the hurricane? Why isn't this liberal? So they're complaining that Taylor Swift only gave $5 million. But you know what's funny, Tim? She actually gave $5 million. You know what Elon Musk did? Elon Musk said, I'm going to give you internet for free. Everybody's like, oh, boy, look at that. But see, here's what he did, Tim. 3 different things that, make him a scumbag in this instance. Number one, you have to pay for the $400 worth of equipment in order to get the 3 month of internet. So that's number one. Number two, you have to sign a contract you have to pay $120 a month. Now, do you pay $120 a month for your internet, Tim?
I pay half of that, and I have fiber.
Exactly, I do too. I have AT&T.
Yeah, I got AT&T.
Yeah, there you go, $60 a month. So he's doing satellite internet. Now, the other thing is, and this is the coup de grace. I know it's coup de grace, but I like to say coup de grace. It's not going to be up and running until another 3 months.
Until the internet's reinstalled at everybody else's house.
And yeah, if you had AT&T in Florida, AT&T in some instances sucks, but I have a feeling that they would get your internet up and running within 3 months.
And I have a feeling, Scott, with fiber specifically, once the power's back on, the fiber will probably be good to go.
Yeah, I'm guessing so. It was when we had the storm, the hurricane down here.
Anytime I've had a tornado, whatever it was, come through here, the internet was able to work. It's just we didn't have the power to turn it back on. So that's a big issue in this is there's no power. If you have a fiber-based internet, it's buried underground. I mean, I don't know with flooding and things like that, but for the most part, I bet a lot of those people can get back on once the power and everything like that is restored. And again, 3 to 4 months out, Elon, he's such a fucking piece of shit.
Well, and the thing is, if you're the so-called richest man in the world, which he certainly purports to be, although I'm not really certain how much that is since his stocks have been tanking, for instance, with X, formerly known as Twitter and things like that. But even if you just paid for the equipment, wouldn't that be actually doing people a solid?
Yeah, but he doesn't want to do people a solid. He wants to make money while he continues to put up this facade of being Iron Man.
But you would still make money if you sat there and said, hey, I'm going to pay for your equipment. I'm going to pay for your first month. You got to sign a contract for a year for 120 a month. You'd still make money.
But you
You
wouldn't
just
get as many
wouldn't.
people. He's
Yeah.
not going to, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bad product at that price, right? Like, I don't care how good your internet is. I don't need to double what I pay for internet when mine works just fine. And when you're
Well,
coming in to save the day, save the fucking day. Don't make money off me.
you're taking what you're doing is you're taking advantage of people because you mentioned who goes to Florida, Tim. It's mainly the old people. It's
Yep.
people like my parents who you come to them and you sit there and said, I'll give you satellite internet for $120 a month. My parents are, well, yeah, where do I sign up? And this is when, both of their children will be like, no, no, stop, no.
Hurricane proof satellite internet. I guarantee you that's how it's being sold to those older people. Like, you go into the villages and say, I got hurricane proof internet. Do you want it? You're going to sell out.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've driven through the villages, Tim. I don't know if you have, but it's we
I used to
hustled
love
through
those
there.
commercials. Those commercials late at night, you're sitting there, watching something stupid on TBS. The villages. And you see some old dude driving down the street in a golf cart. You're like, fuck, I can't wait to be old.
But you know what? You know what's sad about that community, Tim, is that
Is that
I
it
would
has the
say
highest STD rate in Florida?
it's about 2/3 of them are trailers.
That too. Tons of
I
golf
mean,
courses, though.
but it's like, yeah, Trump's great for me, man. Like you're living in a fucking trailer. How good could he be?
And again, highest STD rate in Florida is in the villages. That little zip code right there, they
Mhm.
get around in those golf carts, Scott.
All right,
Those
so what?
golf carts go trailer to trailer, if you know what I mean.
All right, so what do you got, Tim?
I got Elon Musk funding a dark money pack that is attacking Jewish people to Arabs in Dearborn, Michigan, and attacking Arabs to Jewish people in other parts of the country, playing them off against each other, saying that Kamala Harris is a Zionist to the Muslims and saying that Kamala Harris supports Palestine to the Jewish people. And he is throwing a ton of money at this.
Yeah, that's pretty brazen. You
Pretty
know, and
brazen, pretty on par for Elon, for the guy who promotes free speech, but then buys Twitter just to blast his own bullshit out there. Like, you're looking at a guy who took away the block feature when he realized he's the most blocked person on Twitter.
well, what kills me, Tim, is I was going to give a hat tip to Kamala Harris, but we really don't hat tip non-sports figures on this show because she had the temerity to go on Fox News. Now, does that help her campaign? I don't think so. Was she great in her performance? Maybe, maybe not, depending on how you want to, consider what Brett Baer, tried to do to her. But could you imagine Donald Trump going on NBC? Hell, he can't even go on CNN. He can't even go on CBS.
Yeah.
And the thing is that Hillary never would have done that. Hillary never would have gone on Fox News. Joe wouldn't have never gone on Fox News. She's making as much of an effort to reach across the aisle as she possibly can. And what's crazy is it's not going to matter. None of it matters.
Yeah. It's sad. I mean, it also shows she's got cojones, right? Like, I'm not afraid of you people. Like, we know you're propagandists. I'll come on your show. You can talk shit. And I'm smart enough to be like, hey, you're wrong. And here's why. As you said, it's not going to matter. Those of us who know that, like, Donald Trump is a crazy human being and know that JD Vance is even worse would never vote for a group of candidates like that. Then there's people who just like think Trump is cool and there's nothing you could tell them otherwise, right? Like, I don't know how to argue with those people anymore. And quite frankly, I'm just at the cut them out of my life point.
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
Scott, that's all we've got for you here this week. Hopefully, we'll be back on a positive note next week after a successful trip to Green Bay. But fingers crossed that those cheese eaters are able to be handled easily.
And we are inching closer to the beginning of the NBA season.
Very, very close. Reed Shepherd's had some nice looks here in the last week in preseason, even impressed some of the Thunder bench in a video that I saw. So we'll talk a little bit more Rockets basketball next week, but we appreciate everyone who joined us this week. We will see y'all next time on Born on the Bayou Sports.
All right.